This is All I Remember, episode 1. Episode 0 was not what I remember, it's where I am now, 45 years old in 2025, living in my home in the Ozarks. There you go, it's imperfect, it's a little cluttered. I got a few remaining clutter areas, but episode 1 is where I'm from. So where am I from? I'm from a small town in Arkansas, right on the state line of Missouri. And even though the town was in Arkansas, it was an Air Force Base town back in the 80s. I was born in 1980. And the town was an Air Force Base, I think, since the 50s. And it was an important air base. And in the 80s, the Cold War was going on. That was America versus Russia or the Soviet Union. And, you know, movies, there were a lot of movies about that. And we had like nuclear drills where you had to climb under your desk in case the Russians dropped a bomb on us. And you know, it was a fun time. I think even though we were in Arkansas, we caught the influence of the air base strongly. There were people that had lived in other countries, people that were born in other countries, people that were from other states in America. There were international people. There were people that had worldly experiences. I had a friend that was born in Philippines, a friend that was born in Guam, a friend that was born in Turkey, a friend that was born in Italy, a friend that was born in Germany, and so on. So an interesting part of it was I would have a friend, and then all of a sudden you go back to school and your friend's gone. Their family got transferred, so that was a strong factor. And even though I was in a small town in Arkansas in the 80s and it had the whole suburban vibe, and then the air base was there, so you couldn't spit on the sidewalk or spit your gum on the sidewalk or throw your litter down. It was very clean, very neat, very friendly. We were an hour away from Memphis, Tennessee. So Memphis was really important to our vibe. The soul of Memphis trickled down, the words, the accent, the music. I grew up watching television from Memphis, hearing music from Memphis. Radio stations came out of Memphis. The news came out of Memphis. So here we were in a town of, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 people in Arkansas, but we're hearing the news out of a city of over 100,000, and a city that was really important to racial rights. Memphis, was a black city, still is. So I watched a lot of black folks on TV as a kid and through my youth. Black newscasters, commercials for black businesses. It was really important to growing up, hearing about soul music, R&B music. A lot of the America at least, music is from my region, from the Memphis area or from the Delta region of Arkansas where I'm from, like Al Green, Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, B.B. King. So home of the blues, home of rock and roll, home of R&B. And music was really important. Food was really important where I'm from. Food is seasoned more flavorfully than many other areas, and the Delta has distinct ways of flavoring the food. A mix of Southern, Midwestern, and black culture, soul food mixed together. So a lot of unique flavors in the food. That little sound in the background is my 15-year-old Chiweenie grinding his teeth. He just finished eating, and that's one of his little ticks that he does. So I'm sure you can hear that in the background. He won't be around forever, though, but he is now. Today's 4th of July, 2025. So the town I'm from, I'll say having an air base there made it where even the local law enforcement, they all had Air Force tattoos for Strategic Air Command, and most of them were prior service Air Force related. A lot of the teachers in my school were Air Force retired or had relocated to the area from the Air Force. So even though I was in Arkansas, I had teachers from different states and different countries, not all of them. So yeah, it was a cool town. We had the music and the food and the culture of the Delta and Memphis, but then we had the southern aspect, Arkansas, southern, but then not really deep south, not the same as Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. This was considered mid-south. And my town, the accents were more polite and more enunciated than you could go 10 or 20 minutes outside of town and hear way different accents. The people that were in my town, because the Air Force Base was nearby, people talked more enunciated and kind of stretched out their words and tried to overpronounce their words so that they could be understood more so by the people from the air base. But then you could go to a nearby town 15 minutes away and they'd have a complete different cadence, different slang. You could barely understand. You know, I remember going to a town 40 minutes away from where I'm from, and the guy was like, "That coon done plumb up that tray." And I'm like, "What? That coon done plumb up that tray," is how he was saying a raccoon had climbed a tree. So that was interesting. And I'll say Elvis being from Memphis was really important. Elvis culture was big. I was born in 80. Elvis passed away in 77. So Elvis culture was big in Memphis, therefore was big on TV that I watched and in music that I watched. But you know what? We were down the interstate from Chicago and from St. Louis. So there were a lot of people in my town from St. Louis, a lot of people from Chicago. And we could also see the Chicago news and Chicago sports and watch Bozo. So I got exposed to the Chicago Cubs. We didn't have local sports teams. There weren't even sports teams regionally. Near Memphis, there wasn't an NBA team at the time. There was no Tennessee pro team at the time. So whenever you lived in my area, you had to choose, were you a fan of the Dallas Cowboys or the New Orleans Saints? You had to pretty much just pick a team from a state that was somewhere regionally, and usually pick one like Atlanta Braves. You could see them on the radio station TBS that showed Atlanta, or the Chicago Cubs or White Sox. You could catch them on WGN. So you had to pick a team that you could catch on TV when you only had 13 channels. And we didn't, like I said, we didn't have a local team to choose to represent us, to root for us. So that was a factor. I'll say I wouldn't change anything. I'm glad I'm from that town. I'm glad I'm from the South, but I'm glad I'm not from one of those really small towns that was isolated and tucked away. I'm glad I was from a town that had people from other areas and people that had other experiences. Not that it made me any better, but I sure wouldn't trade those experiences for the world. I'm glad that I met people from places other than my town and got to learn some different words and learn about some different cultures from kids that I grew up with. And I still have contact with a couple of them, with a couple of the people from the air base, but not many. So that's where I'm from. You'll hear a lot more stories as I go, but that's the root of it, where I'm from. I'm from Arkansas, the Delta region near Memphis, Tennessee, the Dirty South, Dirty Delta.